The entire world is waiting for the answer to one question right now, in this long, drawn-out economic standoff between China and the United States. Who's going to crack first? If you peel back the headlines and look at what's actually happening, you find a fascinating dynamic. China has the goods. America has the money. On paper, that sounds like a perfect match. In reality, it's anything but. America has the money, but increasingly can't buy the Chinese goods it wants. China has the goods, but is finding it harder to convert them into the cash it used to. So in a long-running standoff like this, what's actually harder to replace? The goods or the money? Let's start with some data nobody really disputes. China remains the world's largest manufacturing economy. Its manufacturing value-added accounts for nearly 27.7% of the global total. The United States comes in second at around 17.3%. To put that in plain terms, for every 4 industrial products made on Earth, roughly 1 comes out of China. But the more telling number is the trade surplus. China's annual trade surplus has crossed $1.18 trillion, a historic high. What that figure really tells you is this. Despite the tariffs, despite the geopolitical noise, despite all the talk of decoupling, global demand for Chinese-made goods has not actually weakened. It has, in many categories, gone the other way. The most recent export data makes this even more striking. In the first 2 months of this year, Chinese exports grew over 20% year-on-year, and the trade surplus continued to expand. In an environment where every external pressure was supposed to slow this down, the numbers did the opposite. Now let's look at the American side. The US is still the world's biggest consumer market. The US dollar is still the world's primary reserve currency. These two facts give America its real leverage in this standoff, and they shouldn't be underestimated. But here is a problem on the other side of the ledger. Actual manufacturing capacity recovery has not matched the political rhetoric. Investment in new industrial projects has been limited. Real manufacturing output has been weak for years. The pace at which factories are actually being built and workforces actually being trained does not match the pace at which the policy speeches are happening, which gets to the most uncomfortable truth about this whole standoff. You can print money. You can raise tariffs. You can announce reshoring initiatives. But actually building factories, training a workforce, and rebuilding deep supply chain capacity is a project measured in decades, not election cycles. No single administration can solve it. This is the part that most commentary misses. America's strategy has been clear. Use tariffs to keep Chinese goods out, coordinate with the EU to reduce dependence on Chinese critical minerals, and tighten export controls on advanced semiconductors. Logically, the goal is to raise the cost of doing business with China and force supply chains to relocate. Actual results have been mixed. Why? Because the so-called China Plus One strategy looks elegant on a slide deck, but executing it is much harder. Southeast Asian countries that were supposed to be the alternative manufacturing hubs still depend on China for intermediate goods and raw materials. You can move final assembly out of China, but the roots of the supply chain are still anchored there. That's exactly why the United States has had to start enforcing rules of origin checks more aggressively. Because Chinese inputs were quietly flowing through third countries and entering the US market anyway. Several Asian economies are now caught in the middle, trying not to lose access to the American market while remaining structurally dependent on Chinese suppliers. Meanwhile, China is making its own adjustments, and the direction is what makes this interesting. For decades, the global association with Chinese goods was simple: cheap. That label is being replaced faster than most people realize. Electric vehicles, solar panels, lithium batteries, advanced industrial equipment. In these categories, Chinese companies aren't winning on price anymore. They're winning on scale combined with technology. That's a structural shift, and it's not something that can be replicated by tariff policy or political will alone. China is also pushing harder on domestic consumption. This is critical. For decades, the Chinese economy was over-reliant on exports. Whenever exports came under pressure, the entire system tightened. Now, Beijing is trying to develop the consumption leg of the economy so that internal demand carries more of the weight. Progress is slow, but the direction is set. So back to the original question. Are the goods harder, or is the money harder? In the short term, money clearly has more flexibility. Dollar's reserve currency status isn't going anywhere in the next decade. That's a fact, and it gives the US enormous strategic optionality. But over the longer term, the value of money depends on one critical assumption, that you can use it to actually buy what you need. If you have the money but can't access the essential goods, the real purchasing power of that money quietly erodes. And manufacturing capacity, especially the kind built over decades and embedded deeply into global supply chains, behaves like a hard asset. Once it's built, it's extraordinarily difficult to replicate. This is why this standoff hasn't produced a clear winner and isn't going to anytime soon. What's really being tested here are two completely different forms of national strength. One side has finance, consumer market scale, and dominance in advanced technology. The other side has manufacturing scale, supply chain depth, and an industrial upgrade curve that's still accelerating. The real determining factor isn't going to be the next round of tariffs or any single trade data release. It's going to be a slower, deeper question: which side actually closes its strategic weakness over the next 10 years? America's weakness is the hollowing out of its industrial base. China's weakness is the lack of high-end technology, autonomy, and global brand reach. Whoever fixes their weakness faster ends up in the stronger position. For the rest of us watching from outside this standoff, the more interesting story isn't really about who wins or who loses. It's about what this confrontation is doing to the underlying structure of the global economy. The world is moving away from a single-center model. The future is multipolar. It's specialized. It's interdependent in ways that don't follow the old rules. That's the shift that actually matters. And it's the one most worth paying attention to.